So I think it's really important that there's representation of everybody as like authors and characters, because if you don't see yourself in books, you aren't going to feel like you fit in like the bigger world. So when you only see characters who are like, I know a lot of our authors are dominated by like white males, and so that's like, it kind of skews our view of things like history or what's out there for us. So if you don't see yourself like in a book or something like that, then you're like, I don't fit in.
I think a diverse representation in literature is just a reflection of what we see around in the world. Not everybody has straight hair, not everybody's blonde, not everybody's white, and not everybody's skinny and has the perfect body. And I think that's what we see in literature so often. And I think it's so important to just be a reflection of our world, because our world is made up of so many differences. It's so important to be able to recognize them. And I feel like reading is such an important part of our lives. If we're not seeing that there, then like when else are we seeing it?
In literature, for me personally, would be just a variety of books that present history, specifically for me, African American history, through the civil rights movement.
So I think this could take like several different forms. I usually see it in being like different races or cultures, which are really cool, and also like males and females or people in between. And I also like seeing people with different points of view or from different time periods. So I really get like a wide span of like people's minds as well as their backgrounds.
Diversity in literature means a lot to me, because I think as a child, if I'd seen a more diverse cast of characters in a book, I would have had a way better view of the world than I do now with that lack of diversity. And it would look like characters of all different walks of life, all different races, sexualities, gender identities, and I think that would have really helped me come to terms with my own identity a lot sooner, and so it would just help everybody be more accepting. And
well, to me, a diverse representation in literature means a diversity of viewpoints, and with that comes all sorts of other things such as ethnicity, cultural background, even political affiliation. And to me, what that looks like as a reader is picking up a book, getting into it, and saying, wow, I've never seen the world like this before. This could be another planet for all I know, because it's completely foreign to me. And that's how you really gain different viewpoints and gain empathy for people that you wouldn't normally have.
I feel like I know, we do read a lot of, older, we read like Shakespeare and, I forgot who wrote the Odyssey, but I don't know, we read like a lot of older books that are all written by, white men, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think it's really important to look at that older literature and things like that. I really like Shakespeare. I think there's a lot of value to that, but we also, if that's all we have, I think we read one female author last year in my English class, and this year we are more diverse. We have Virginia Woolf and Jane Austen, which I think are really cool that we're reading those books, because I know when I write essays for, things like Shakespeare or, William Gates or things like that, I mainly wrote stuff that was I wrote feminist pieces critiquing that sort of literature, and now I can write about how Jane Austen is writing about these crazy, gender roles and just things like that, which are really cool to write about, instead of having to you don't have to critique everything, but that's what I chose to do.
I don't think there's enough, I think that every once in a while we'll see it, and it's just that's important. But it should be everywhere. We shouldn't have to point out every specific point in which we see it, because it's a miracle that somebody put a person of a different race in there. It should be all the time. It should just be continuous, because that's just how it is in real life.
Actually, I do, because at the beginning of this year, we did several months spent reading literature from different points of view. And even though we're reading Shakespeare right now, which is kind of the most traditional literature ever, I think my teachers have really done a good job of trying to bring up these different points of view as much as they could.
I think representation in literature is important, because so many people look to literature as role models, and as guides for what they do in their own life. And if they can see characters that represent their own identities in that literature, then in like books that they love, then they can feel like they're accepted in society and in different cultures. And then even if they don't personally identify with an identity that is in a book, then they can learn more about it, and it's an educational opportunity for them, and it can make them appreciate other cultures better.
I do feel as if there's diversity within a specific subset. You know, we have a lot of, the term old white man literature gets thrown around a lot, and obviously there are many different types of old white men. But the thing is that we also need to read more books by African American authors, by Asian American authors, by just even Asian authors, and things like that, because I think their views are definitely important as well.
I think it's so important because when you're a little kid and you're reading, all you want to be able to do is recognize yourself in that character. You want to connect, because that's what you do when you read. You connect with those characters. And it just provides another barrier of something you can't do if you are not represented personally with other characters.
Because like when we read these stories about people, it's validating their points of existence. It's saying that their story matters, what they think matters. And so when you see people from different points of view in literature that are similar to you, it kind of is saying that you matter too.
I think it's important because it allows students to make connections and feel connected to the works they're reading. So like a student of color reading an all-white, like a white author's book, it's a lot harder to make connections with that literature than making connection with a book that's not, like that someone of your same race wrote. Like it's easier to connect and like understand the story, and it feels empowering to like see like your people of your race like making it into like school literature.
Representation in literature is important because it's one of the only lenses through which we get to see the world without actually being there. So for example, I can't necessarily be there to witness the 1986 People Power Revolution in the Philippines, but I could read about it in fiction, in literature, through the eyes of someone who did.
As a cisgender white female, I definitely feel represented just because I know when I read like Pride and Prejudice, I look at Lizzie and like she was, you know, a badass of her time. I don't know if we can say badass, but she was like a very empowering figure of her time. You know, she kind of like broke down some of those gender roles and was very independent and things like that. And you can draw a lot of connections between, like I drew a lot of connections between myself and that character.
I don't feel represented, and I remember just always searching for that when I was younger, and always wondering, if I read a book about a black person, why does it have to be about racism, or why does it have to be about the struggle? Because sometimes I don't want to read about the struggle with black people. Sometimes I want to read about romance and all the other stuff that white people get to write about and white people get to recognize in their own characters and their own people that we don't have the option of doing. So I think that's where we miss out on the representation the most.
Pretty well. Like there's no one piece of literature that's going to completely represent me, but I think I can definitely find different pieces of me in different pieces of literature.
Yes and no. So in America, as a white person, I'm definitely represented a fair amount, a lot, but especially with like queer identity and gender identity, I have to search really hard to find books that represent who I feel I am at all. I don't think I've ever actually found one where I was represented fully. So I think there needs to be a lot more diversity in literature, especially in YA, which is what a lot of high schoolers are reading now, so that more people can find themselves in books.
I didn't until I read Interpreter of Maladies my junior year, which I thought was pretty cool. It's about Indian people. I'm Indian. And I was like, this is awesome, and it made me feel really empowered, and it made me realize what was lacking before.
No, I don't. And that isn't necessarily an awful thing, simply because it's very good to step outside of your own shoes and see what other people think. But on the other hand, it is very valuable to be able to relate to a character in a book or relate to an author in a way that, as of now, I can't.